Welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 116. Today we're going to be talking about the art of self-portraits, and this is following on from last week when I was talking about the ultimate selfie, where I did 10 shots of myself in the same image, and trailing next week where I'm actually setting up the self-portrait challenge. So we're going to be talking about, well, self-portraits. So yes, stay tuned. We're live here on YouTube now. Well, unless you happen to be watching the recordings. So it is also worth always pointing out that if you are watching the recordings, then you can find all the other recordings here as well. So all previous 115 episodes, go to youtube.com/Kim Ayres and you can find all the previously recorded episodes. And of course, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. So somewhere down here, there'll be a point where you can hit subscribe and make sure you click the notification bell so that you can be notified of all the new episodes as and when they appear. So, but if you happen to be here live right now as this is going out, leave me a comment, say hello, tell me what the weather's like, tell me what's happening in your corner of the world, and we'll have lots of chat while we're at it. So yes, here, today we're talking about self-portraits. Now, some of you who have longer memories, who've been sort of watching this for a while, will know that I did a whole bunch on self-portraiture. Now it's 15 or 16 months ago. It was pretty much episode 51, 52. I think it was 52 that I set up a self-portrait challenge. Now, okay, so I am kind of repeating myself, but I'm kind of also going on the fact that there will be some people here who weren't around back then, and even those of you who were won't necessarily recall everything that I happened to say on a podcast 15 months ago in your past. If you do, I think you're probably pretty exceptional with that. And besides which, a little bit of reinforcement never harms. So, excuse me. I can see we've got comments in already, so let's have a little take a little look, see who we've got here in the house. Oh, Robert says, howdy from Paris. I hope to catch up soon. That's right. Robert has actually always sent me a message to say he and Anne are happily having a wee vacation in Paris and Germany, and so yeah, enjoy your holiday. I know you'll be watching on catch up. So yeah. Have fun on your European trip. April says hello everyone from a very hot Long Island, New York. Meg says hello everyone. Pat says hi from Somerset. Too darned hot. April says have fun in Paris. Hope to see some of your photos. All right, that chat going backwards and forwards. Yeah, more chats. People chatting to Robert. Meg chatting to Pat, and Pat chatting to Meg. And right, okay. Naria says hello everyone from Exmouth in the UK. May Britt says hello from a cloudy Copenhagen. We're expecting heavy rain in an hour or so. Jackie's joining us from South Africa. Ben saying hello from a softly warm Edinburgh. Pat's saying she's praying for rain. Yep, so's Ben for that amount, but it's also only getting pitiful amounts. Maggie says hello from what looks like a nearly raining Castle Douglas. Yeah, as I look out the window, it does look pretty dreary. Could pour down at any moment. Roy says, greetings from a wet West Yorkshire, and yep, more bits going backwards and forwards. Binod Singh, Dipti Mahi, I think, it says, good evening everyone from India. Karen says, a muggy but heavily raining wet Yorkshire, and Nadia has joined us as well and says, hi everyone. This is great, so we've got plenty of people in today. So, yes, good afternoon from the UK and Europe, good morning in North America, probably South America too, and good evening in Asia. So, right, so, self-portraits. Now, there's a number of ways of going about it. In a way, a sort of subgenre of the self-portrait is the selfie. And the selfie has become extraordinarily popular in the last few years, primarily because of this, our phones. All our phones these days tend to carry cameras on them. And the development of the selfie happened. And for a long while, I think the selfie was a kind of much derided form of self-expression. But less so. As time goes on, I think it's become more and more acceptable. But then within that, there's different kind of ways of doing selfies, shall we say. So I'm going to explore a little bit about the notion of the selfie and then how that differs from maybe more particularly kind of self-portrait. Then we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to show you some examples of self-portraits that I've done. And part of the problem that we have with self-portraits also is the idea of, well, putting ourselves in front of the camera. Most people don't really enjoy being in front of the camera very much. However, a self-portrait is the chance for you to have full control over that. However, there's also technical difficulties with doing self-portraits when you can't actually see through the lens and trying to get it focused if you're not in front of the camera while trying to be behind the camera. So we'll talk a little bit about technical difficulties, but I'm also going to be discussing the kind of emotional difficulties of self-portraits. You know, when you don't like being in front of the camera, why would you put yourself in front of the camera, and how can you maybe kind of trick your brain into going, actually, this is okay, and maybe even more fun, I can actually have a bit of fun with this. So these are the kind of things we're going to be talking about today. There will also there is a critique section, although I say section, we only had one entry for critique today. That one came from Viji, so we'll be looking at that. And then finally, at the end of the program, I'll be reminding you again about the self-portrait challenge for next week. So, right, let's talk a little bit then. So, the selfie. I think the thing is, the idea of self-portraits, oh, the rain has started, for anybody who was wondering. We've now got splatters against the window. Distracted for a moment. Yeah, back to self-portraits. The idea, self-portraits have basically, in one form or another, been around, probably not much less time than man himself has been around. Or man, as in people. The earliest form of cave or rock painting from tens of thousands of years ago, from our Stone Age ancestors, is where people put a handprint on a rock and then chewed up pigment and paint and blew on it, splattered it, and then removed their hand and they left a handprint. And this was kind of almost like your original graffiti. It was your original I was here. And then you can almost guarantee that those rock paintings, those cave paintings where you have the tiny little stick men hunting the big animals, the person who was painting them, some of them will have bound to have sort of put in a little particular stick figure, knowing full well that that one represented themselves. There is this idea with a self-portrait, which is how we are seen from the outside, or how we would wish to be seen from the outside. There's something kind of deeply psychological about the notion of a self-portrait. There's the portrait as in somebody else has taken a photo of us. Now, quite often, other people take photos of us whether we want them to or not, and that is disempowering. That makes us feel uncomfortable, and that helps contribute to why a lot of us don't like having our photo taken, because somebody else will suddenly, without our permission, whip out their phone, go click, they catch us when we were half blinking, they catch us when we're in the middle of saying something, our faces at a funny angle, we're kind of like, and I go click, and then suddenly that picture is uploaded to the internet for 500 people to look at, and inside we feel like part of our image, our identity has been taken without our permission, and it feels very, very disempowering. That kind of contributes to it. Now, another problem that we have with portraiture is the fact that portraits don't really look like us. Not only on a number of levels. First of all, there's our self-image. You know, for all the fact, I mean, I am now 55, I will be 56 later this year. I have all the kind of, you know, I look my age. Inside, I'm still maybe in my 20s or 30s. Mentally, I haven't really caught up with how other people see me. So when I see a photo of myself, I automatically think I look much older than I thought I was. And that kind of, again, makes me feel a little bit unsettled. And a lot of us, whether it's the amount of hair we've got, the colour of our hair, the size we are, we don't necessarily match up to our own self-image. And then the key problem that an awful lot of people suffer from is the fact that our face is the wrong way round. What I mean by that is that 90% of the time, or 99% of the time, we see our faces is in the mirror. And so we have got used to seeing a reversed version of our face. Every time we comb our hair, every time we put on makeup, clean our teeth, our face is the wrong way round as such. But we've got used to seeing it that way. So when the image is flipped and we suddenly see ourselves as the way everybody else sees us, it looks wrong. Now, what I'll do here is I just want to show you, for example, here's a picture of the Mona Lisa, right? And here we go. So we've got the Mona Lisa the way we're used to seeing her on the left, and we've got the Mona Lisa on the right where the image is flipped. And at this point, I would ask you, which do you prefer? Now, okay, it might take you a little while. We could do a little poll and get you to write it in. But although, please do scribble down any comments if you think there's something interesting happening here. Because in reality, what I found when I do this at camera clubs or I give talks on portraiture, I tend to find that 90 to 95% of people prefer the Mona Lisa on the left. And the one on the right just doesn't quite look right. And why is this? It's because we've always seen the image of the Mona Lisa presented to us as she is on the left. So when it's turned on the right, it just kind of looks wrong. Now, if this is so with a painting, how much more so with your own face? So if your face is appearing the opposite way round than you think it should be, it doesn't seem quite right. I mean, the simple fact is, none of us have a perfectly symmetrical face. 90% of people have one eye slightly larger than the other. If you have a parting, you comb your hair on one side rather than the other. A lot of people smile slightly more out of one side of their face than the other. We might have moles or scars. We have the pointier eyebrow and the curvier eyebrow. If you've got chip out your tooth, anything like this, all these things are on one side of the face, and then when you reverse it, it's suddenly on the other side of the face, and that just doesn't look right. So if your nose goes 2 millimeters to the left, suddenly it's 4 millimeters to the right of where you're expecting it to be. So all these things make us feel uncomfortable. So whenever we see a group photo, everybody else in that photo looks exactly the way we're expecting them to, except us. We look wrong. And as such, we become convinced we are the least photogenic person in the family, if not the entire world. So when you combine the fact that our face appears the wrong way round, that people are taking photos of us and disempowering us, the fact that our face doesn't even match up to our own self-image, all these things make us feel deeply uncomfortable about having our photo taken. Now, not everybody, but a large number of people certainly feel that way. Okay, I'll just quickly leap in here because I can see a few more comments coming in. Oh, Ben said, I think those prehistoric blown handprints are very moving. Maggie agrees. Says loves the connection with humanity ever after. April agrees also, says about the feeling younger than you actually are. I'm the same way, my mind is in my 20s. April and May prefer the Mona Lisa, the original one. April also thinks her hair looks flatter on the right, which is and yet all it is a direct mirror copy. There's been no other distortions. Maggie says, do you think we ever prefer the flipped image of ourselves? I don't know about prefer. I think it's what happens is you get used to it. I mean, certainly I've done an awful lot of self-portraits, and of course I do this podcast every day. So and at the end of each week I have to watch it back to make sure I haven't made some almighty terrible mistake that I need to edit or cut out. So I've got used to how my face looks in reverse, so it doesn't bother me anymore. I've got used to it. So it's not that I prefer my face one way round to the other, it's just I'm kind of okay. I just get more shocked with the fact that my beard seems grey, or my hair has receded more, or the bald patch seems to be getting larger. Because none of these things seem to quite fit in with my self-image. But I think the more you're exposed to your face being the other way around, the less it freaks you out. It's rather similar to like when you first hear your voice recorded. Your voice sounds completely wrong because you are used to hearing your voice from inside your skull. So when you first hear a recording, you think, oh my God, that sounds awful. Nobody else in the world thinks your voice sounds awful. Only you think your voice sounds awful because it doesn't match up with what you're expecting. Now, I did a stint in radio back in my late 20s, early 30s, where because I was on the radio every week, I got used to my radio voice. And as such, my radio voice stopped freaking me out. I just recognised it as another version of my voice, and it stopped worrying me so much. Similarly, again, doing the podcasts, and listening back to the podcast, I'm hearing my voice. My voice no longer worries me because I've got used to it. But until you get used to it, it all feels wrong. So, same thing with the face. So with all these kind of things then, why would anybody do a self-portrait? Well, the thing is, if we go back to this notion of the selfie is a kind of, it's a form of communication. And especially since with days of lockdown, with days of the internet, a lot of communication happening through these screens, it's a way of sort of, I mean, we always kind of did that. You know, we would have a picture of ourselves on holiday. You know, I mean, how many of you have, I mean, I know I've been asked if I could take a photo of some people on holiday with the picture of that particular monument or landscape behind them. Or we might have asked somebody else to take the picture of us. So there's a marker, there's a point of saying we were here at this time. It's a gateway to a memory of a particular time and place. But but painters, like I say, I mean, right back to cave painting times, they were kind of doing that. But then artists themselves, from Rembrandt to Dürer to Van Gogh to Leonardo da Vinci, all these people have got very, very famous self-portraits. And the thing about that is the portrait is a great place to practice. Okay, when you are doing the self-portrait, if you are drawing or painting, you're not having to worry about paying a model. So it's down to, you know, you've got control. You can take as long as you like. Now, in photography terms, this is really important. This is something I really want you as a photographer, you as somebody who's trying to develop and learn your photography and to really kind of grasp is the self-portrait. Don't come at it from this idea of, oh, I hate this image of myself. Come at it as this idea, here's a chance to really explore portraiture, and you can use yourself as the model. Nobody else needs to necessarily ever see these things, but it's a chance for you to explore light, composition, very similar to still life. Do you remember when we talked about doing still life, and periodically we talk about it? Because the great thing about still life is you don't need anybody else. You don't need necessarily any fancy equipment, but you don't need anybody else. You don't have to worry about anybody else's timetable. You can do it all yourself at your own pace. And it's the same thing with self-portraits. So this is part of what I'm going to be doing today, is trying to convince you to take part, because I want you to take part in this self-portraiture challenge for next week. And to do that, I know I've got to overcome all the reservations that you've got. Okay, a couple of other comments just to see what we've got here. Okay, Rosemary was also wondering about what Maggie said about preferring the flipped image of ourselves. Nadia says, you spoke about reading from left to right. In the original, you see the face first with the flipped and then the hair, which is no point of interest. Okay, so yeah, going back to the Mona Lisa, maybe if you're reading the face and the faces, if you're reading from left to right, you might read the face slightly differently. And I guess there's something in that to a certain extent. We've talked about where if you're reading from left to right, I mean, let's just pull this up again a sec, because now you've got me curious there, Nadia, which is brilliant. If we're reading in this direction, okay, tell you what, let's just open that with Photoshop for a moment, just so I can draw a couple of little lines on it, because that notion of direction I think actually is kind of interesting. So if, let's do that, let's just grab a pencil tool, and so if what we're saying is for most of us we're reading in this direction, and what happens if we're reading in this direction, we come to this hair and that acts as a kind of a natural block, so our attention is kept here and then the eyes are looking at us. But the nose and the face is kind of, let's say, okay, let's go back. Yeah, because the nose and the face is pointing this way. So our attention we're reading left to right, but then this is curving us back this way. So we're kind of staying within this area. However, when you come to here, the face is pointing that way. So it tends to throw you out of the picture a little bit more. And you pretty much ignore everything before you get to the face. That doesn't, yeah, interesting. I think you're right. There's maybe different ways of even reading it from left to right. So that's kind of coming into it at all. But as you can see from here, now we're kind of in this space. That, you know, or the only thing that's happened is it has been flipped. But there does seem to be a slightly different feel. You know, does her nose look like it's a slightly different shape? Is the hair kind of feeling a bit flatter or less washed, or the hairnet is different or something? Everything is not quite the same. It doesn't feel like it's just flipped. Okay, so that's an interesting point, Nadia. Thank you. So, okay, let's go back then. Let's start throwing in some examples then of portraits and self-portraits and what have you. So, I think really to start off with let's start off with. I suppose really, let's say one of the reasons why most of us, or certainly I, had a kind of terrible idea of selfies, and why for years I would be very, very derisive of them. And that's because this seemed to be the typical selfie. And I still see a lot of these about. You'll have a young man or woman, usually in a bathroom, because bathrooms quite often have an all-round light, and they're just pointing a photo of themselves in the bathroom mirror, completely oblivious to the fact that there's a towel hanging over the back. Quite often there's even a toilet sitting in view as well. And you think that's an awful background. Why would anybody take their photo in a background? And yet so many people, because they've got a large mirror in the bathroom, they do these selfies. And then they're doing some kind of trout pout or duck face or whatever while they're trying to... And it all seems to be about vanity on a big scale, on a kind of, oh, look at me, I'm posing. And that just makes pretty much everybody else who's looking at it feel fairly uncomfortable. So when you see a lot of those, and if that's the kind of original idea of a selfie, is that somebody's going to hold up a camera and pull some kind of really weird face to try and make themselves look particularly beautiful or attractive, which it doesn't, but perhaps to them it does, or to their friends it seems to, or everybody else seems to be doing it, so they feel that that's what they've got to do. You're just kind of, maybe it's an age thing as well, but you just kind of, why bother? But that kind of thing then, that kind of selfie, I think is just... and so I kind of avoided it for years. But then I think I really came to realise the fun of it. I remember the time that the best selfie I kind of felt I ever took, and it was before I started doing it with a phone, it was about coming up to 6 years ago. I was in Morocco, on a camel in the desert. And some of you I know have heard this story before, but and basically you're kind of on this camel and you're kind of rocking about all over the place. I've got a wide angle, I'm using a DSLR, not a phone. I've got a wide angle lens on it, and one hand's clinging onto the camel for dear life, while the other one, I thought, I've got to get a photo of this. It was just so much fun. And this was the photo I took. And what I love about this photo is actually the unbridled joy that's on my face. I was in the middle of on the edge of the Sahara Desert, on a camel with a group of other photographers, and it was just one of the most exciting, brilliant times of the decade. You know, I wanted to capture that moment, but of course, because I'm a photographer, I don't just want to get one of me. I also want to get one of sand dunes and other camels in the background as well. So I'm still trying to work out, and you go rule of thirds, bits of diagonals. You'll still see the photographer's eye trying to get the composition in, but at the same time, the real thing up here was to try and say, this is an amazing experience, and I wanted to capture and to remember and to have this gateway to a memory to say, this is an experience that I want to remember. And when I look at this photo, it does that. It ticks those boxes. It does take me straight back there. And so that was kind of my first sort of selfie as such. So just taking a quick look here. Rosemary said, okay, I tried mirroring a headshot of myself now. Definitely looks more like me. Yeah, okay, so to flip back to that then, that is a case. Very often when I'm working with clients, and I'm doing portraits and they're kind of thinking, I'm feeling uncomfortable with myself, what I will do is I will tether my camera to a tablet or a laptop. So I've got a wire that runs from the camera to the laptop or tablet, and when I go click, the picture appears on the screen. What that allows me to then do is I can flip the image, and suddenly the person can see that actually, they go, that does look like me. Because that's what they're used to. And their partner will look at it and go, no, it looks nothing like you, because of course their partner's used to them seeing them the other way around. So yeah, you're absolutely right there, Rosemary. If you take an image, take a photo of yourself and then flip it, and you'll often find that it looks more like you. However, it will then look really odd to everybody else, because everybody else is used to seeing your face the other way around. I see Viji's joined us. Hello, Viji. Glad you could make it along. Right. Okay. So that was the camel. Then I think the first time I really got a sense of selfie me with the phone was almost exactly 5 years ago. 5 years ago, our grandson Alfie was born, and what happened here was, well, we'd gone out to the hospital to see Holly and new baby Alfie, and I'd just got a new phone with one that finally was able to take reasonable photos. And Alfie here is less than a day old. And I'm holding my wee grandson for the first time, and I thought, yeah, this is what the phone's for. I hadn't taken in, the big camera. I didn't want to kind of have all the big snapshots and all the rest of it. But the phone was perfect, absolutely perfect for just capturing that moment. The photo doesn't have to be the greatest photo. It doesn't have to be perfectly formed and perfectly lit and all the rest of it. It just needs to be good enough to be able to capture the emotion. It is a snapshot. And I would say that the mobile phone enabled me to start to enjoy again the idea of a snapshot, because once I become a professional photographer, I found I couldn't do snapshots. Every time I took the photo, I was always trying to line it up perfectly, and if I couldn't get the perfect angles and the perfect lighting, I kind of wouldn't bother. But this time, it's good enough. And this was where I really then found the power of the selfie, was in taking photos, not just of me, but if I'm going to have a photo of me, it needs to be a photo of me and meaning something. So maybe me on a camel in the desert is a kind of fun thing to do, or me with my grandson, or for that matter, me with my wife. Now, of course, Maggie hates having her photo taken, but she doesn't mind this one of us going out. So I can't remember whether this was my birthday or perhaps Maggie's birthday a couple of years back. I suspect the fact that I'm not wearing a thick fleece under that coat means that it's probably Maggie's birthday. We were down at the beach, July, cold, raining, typical Scottish weather, but windy too. And again, this then is a bit of fun, and I think that notion, and likewise, I mean, plenty of you will have seen on my personal Facebook page, I have my avatar on my personal Facebook page is 9 times out of 10 is a picture of me and Meg, my daughter. Most of the time it's a picture of me and Meg at In-House Chocolates having a hot chocolate together, which is always lovely. For me, the idea of a selfie just on its own, of me posing, pulling a face, what's the point? But capturing me with my daughter, me with my wife, me with my grandson, me on the back of a camel, these things I do feel that there is merit to. So these days I'm much less quick to dismiss the idea of a selfie, other than the one of just somebody posing straight into it, which I still don't fully understand, and suspect that perhaps it's maybe an age thing. Maybe if I was 30 or 40 years younger, it would make more sense. And I have to cultures change. Every older generation thinks that the new generation is doing it wrong, and it wasn't like that in their day. We've been saying that for as long as we've been human. Probably chimpanzees and gorillas still feel the same thing about their younger generations as well. Okay, what else have we got here? Meg says, was it hard to go on a camel? Yes, it was. It was bouncing up and down all over the place, and you have to cling on really tightly. So it was really hard holding on with one hand only to try and take the photo with the other. But it was fun and worth it. Viji says, selfie for me is not just mobile, definitely not holding a DSLR on the back of a camel. Sounds tricky. Meg Britt says, what a wonderful photo of you both. Makes me smile. That'll be presumably the one with the hair across then. Viji says, 1 day old baby Alfie. Oh, we were talking about Alfie. Alfie in one hand, other hand holding the mobile. Family photos are always endearing. April says she loves the pictures of me and Meg. They're always so cute. Well, it's Meg who's so cute. Let's face it. If I can put up my greatest, most finely honed, created photo, and I'll get 15 likes. I put up a picture of me and Meg, and we'll get 150. So there is the Meg effect. Meg always manages to get me more likes on social media, guaranteed. Okay, so the selfie then has that notion of the kind of the instant. Okay, so you have the phone or your DSLR, and it's an idea of you're taking an instant moment to say, this is where I am, or this is who I'm with, and it is a snapshot, and it's a quick form of communication. A little bit like, you might be meeting a friend down the road, you're just passing the street, oh, what you been up to? Oh, just back from a holiday, this is where I was. It's a kind of a quick shout out. So I think that's where the value of selfies lie. But what's the difference with them with a self-portrait? Self-portrait, I think, is a more considered image, and a portraiture is you're coming into this idea of portraiture, which is you're thinking of a narrative. You're thinking of what you're trying to do is say something about the person, really, I suppose, more than just the action or the place. We're trying to get across some kind of mood or emotion. We are tapping back into this notion of narrative. Well, I suppose there's narrative in the selfie too. We've just been talking about that. But in a portraiture is a bit more considered. In portraiture, as a photographer, you're thinking much more about light, line, form, composition, as well as the narrative. This is something to study. This is something to create. Now, if we go back to then this idea of, like I say, Van Gogh, Rembrandt, Leonardo, cave painters would paint themselves, and it's a way of practicing. It's a way of getting a chance to really study photography without having to worry about needing anybody else, or having anybody else looking over your shoulder necessarily as well. So at that point, I think there's a chance to really play. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to create some self-portraits. So now you can use mirrors, okay? I mean, the selfie, there's the typical kind of mirror. I would try and say avoid, if you can, just the standard cliche of just standing in front of a mirror, holding a phone up in front of your face. I mean, this kind of thing, I took this photo deliberately to sort of play up the notion. I've seen this 10,000 times. The mean, moody photographer holding their camera up in front of the mirror, and this one was just taken in the bathroom in natural light. And it shows that you're a photographer because you've got a big camera and you're standing in front of the mirror. But it feels a bit more showy-offy than actually trying to tell me anything particular. More fun, I think, if you're going to use a mirror, look for other places, look for other ways of playing with it. So, for example, this one I think is much more fun. I was in, this was taken in the Kakubri galleries in Kakubri, and in the lift or elevator, for those of you across the pond, usually have a mirror in them. Now, if you're actually moving between floors, it's a bit trickier because then there tends to be all this kind of vibration. But this particular lift wasn't being used very much, and I was able to sort of spend a little time, put it on a half-second exposure or something like that. You see, this was taken back in the days when face masks were a bit more required. And I think there's something a bit more fun about this. This is less about me showing off, hey, I'm a photographer, and more kind of I'm taking a photo in a lift and I'm trying to sort of play around with it. And what you're seeing is a kind of more of a photographer in action shot. And I'm taking, there is something about the way the body is bent over, and even down to the fun little things, I think, like the fact that you can see my water bottle in the pocket. You can read some of the signs on the wall, albeit they're in reverse. You've got the scratches in the metal, and I think there's something just a little bit more fun with this. It's not sort of trying to portray yourself as something that you're not. Difficult way of putting that. Showy-offy again, I suppose. Difficult. Maggie will have a Scots word for this. So there's that kind of thing. Now, another way of using the mirror, actually, this one was more of a kind of accidental one. I took this photo, then realised I was in the mirror, and then moved out the way to not be in the mirror. But this was a behind-the-scenes shot when I was doing a photo shoot. I don't think I've ever actually shown this photo shoot, a vintage photo shoot I did with Basement 20, just before lockdown, back at the beginning of 2020. But hair and makeup was being done on the models, and I was wanting, and of course most of the time where you're standing, the model's being done in front of the mirror, I can't get in front of the model because then I'm kind of getting in the way. So I'm standing behind her trying to take a photo of her reflection. And I really quite like this photo. I quite like the fact that you can see the model, you can see the makeup artist, you can see the front of her face out of focus here, back of her head there. The focal point is on the model here, getting her hair done, watching what's going on. We've got, you know, little kind of hand mirror or phone rather, and brush and stuff on the bit here. And of course you've then got photographer in the background, not aware that he's in the background until it's too late. But I think that's kind of okay, because again, it's not about showing off, it's about a kind of photographer in action, and I think that's all right. I think that there's a kind of fun bit to be had with that. So, you know, mirrors can really be a great device for getting that photo of yourself. And what I would say is allow yourself to play with that idea a bit. Use a mirror, but maybe use it creatively. You know, the mirrors are also great devices because mirrors are often, they can show you things that are going on in the background that you can't normally see. So they're like a sort of a doorway into another world almost, that kind of Alice through the looking glass. The world is slightly different through a mirror. So there's things you can see in a mirror that you can't see from the same angle without the mirror. So can you put something in the reflection that maybe changes the narrative slightly? And I think there's a lot of potential there for the self-portrait, is to do the self-portrait, but place the placement of other objects or other scenes, or, you know, what can you see in the mirror as well that's going to add to the narrative. What are we saying here? Yeah, or April says she likes the one that's in the elevator, and it's a nice accident to get that one in of me with the hairdresser, with the model and makeup artist as well. Maggie says there is a Scots phrase, but I better not write it. Yes. Okay, so let's move on then to the idea of there's the mirror, but then there's the idea of actually turning the camera like completely on yourself. And like I say, it's a chance to practice. It's a chance to, now sometimes you can use the photo. I suppose what it is, really what I'm kind of getting at here, is moving past the idea that you have to have a photo of your best self. There's always this feeling that, and certainly the person who's sort of pulling the duck face and what have you, is somehow trying to do the best version of themselves, show themselves off in that they are prettier, smoother skinned, younger, whatever than they actually are. And I suppose, yeah, of course we all want to put ourselves in the best light. But I think portraiture, there's more fun. We all have faces that are aging, that are different, that are moving and changing. And sometimes portraiture is a way of really exploring our face in a way that we don't see in the mirror. Because we sort of see ourselves in the mirror, usually we kind of look at our face in a particular way. But when it is reversed, when it is caught static, it gives us a chance to kind of view our faces in a slightly different way. But like I say, it's also a chance to sort of practice. So let me show you, so I'll show you a couple of self-portraits here. Let's move on from that one. So this one I did a little while back, and I think last year at some point. And I was this followed on from, basically, I was out and I caught sight of myself in the mirror with the hat and the beard and the beard getting grey, and my beard was getting a bit thicker and everything. And I immediately started thinking about, essentially, that I was aging. I was one of those moments just where you see yourself, and I was the reflection was older than my self-image. And I wanted to try and somehow capture a sense of that. I wanted to sort of remove the smile. We're not here to try and capture warm, smiley, welcoming faces. There's an opportunity to try and create an interesting portrait. And the portrait here, and I'm using window light, just natural window light coming from the left, and I've got a black cloth hanging behind me. So it's a chance to explore light. And again, as you should know, or some of you may remember from previous conversations, that if you have a side light, a light coming from the side, then what it tends to do is it's less flattering. It enhances the landscape of the face. Because the shadows are coming from the side, you get more of a sense of depth. So the wrinkles and the lines and the nose and the texture and all that kind of stuff becomes more enhanced when you have a side light. And I think there's something much more interesting about this. So it's to break away from the idea of saying, I have to look my best, and move into the world of saying, can I look interesting? And interesting is much more fun than pretty or handsome or, you know, that kind of glammed up. Move away from the glammed up. What can you explore in your face that's maybe a little bit more interesting? And then I shortly after this, I did another portrait where nearly 9 or 10 years ago, I did this photo when I was exploring a bit of portraiture. I'd seen a photo like this, and I was just trying it out myself. Again, this time I've got the light coming from the right. It's just straightforward window light portrait. And then in following that last one, a few months later, I came across this one in the archives, and I thought, well, how young I look in this one, because of course it's, you know, now it's 9 years younger than I am now, and I've aged since then. And I thought, well, what would it look like if I did the same angle, the same lighting now, and same position? And I did this photo. So this photo then is the updated version. This is the older brother of this one. The eyebrows the forehead's receded, the beard is greyer, the lines are deeper, and the eyebrows are even more unruly than they were back here. At this point, the eyebrows are starting to get a bit unruly, the beard's starting to go a bit grey, the hair's starting to go a little bit more up on the temples. In here, this is all taken. And so actually, this becomes a kind of interesting exercise as well. This is something you can play around with self-portraiture. Is there a photo of you from 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, and could you recreate it? Or maybe that's a challenge for another day. I don't know. No, maybe not. No, I think that will be an interesting one. And actually, if you do decide to post one of those kind of ideas, a recreated portrait from the past, then please, by all means, stick in a picture of the previous one too, so that we can see what you've done. And maybe try and get it with the same lighting, the same angle, and the same expression on your face. So a couple more comments here. Maybrit says, good photo of you with the hat. April says, you remind me of the fisherman here. Fisherman, I like the impact of this photo. Yeah, somebody else called that one the grumpy fisherman photo. So that one always sticks in my head as the grumpy fisherman. Pat says, fascinating, the two photographs of you. Yeah, and there's a notion of the interest of that. And I think taking photos of yourself several years apart, again, it's not about, hey, look at me. It's about an exploration. And it's an exploration of yourself, an exploration of your psychology, of your moods, your feelings, your self-belief, how you feel about yourself. But it's also, don't forget what I'm saying, is this a chance to practice portraiture, practice lighting, practice interesting lighting, side lighting, whether you want to go black and white, whether you want to intensify your editing, intensify the darks and the shadows and the contrasts. There's a lot of opportunity there to really play in a way that, if you're photographing somebody else, there's a time limit on them. They might be self-conscious as well, but even if they're not, how long can you keep photographing them? And if, so you may be photographing a relative, they're okay with it for a bit, but then they've got lives to get on with. Or you're trying to photograph a child, and we all know that they don't have the patience to stick around, or you're photographing a model, in which case you're paying them by the hour. So the self-portrait, really, you've got an opportunity here to really explore and develop your photography skills, your skills of lighting and composition and narrative on yourself. So other things, another example of that is where where's the photo gone? Here we go. This was a photo where I had an idea for lighting. I had some static lights, and I had this big idea, a large round light here and a large round light here. And I wanted to know what it looked like, but I couldn't find anybody else to do it on. So I turned the camera on myself. Set it up, and then kind of, again, just putting a serious face just to sort of see how the shadows would fall. And I found it an interesting lighting experiment. So to have that kind of layers of light, then shadow, then light, and the way the kind of shadows fall and everything else was a kind of it. And having managed to explore that on me, it then becomes part of the tools in the toolbox, so that when I'm photographing somebody else, sooner or later there's going to come a point where I go, I know the perfect kind of lighting I need for this particular situation, and I've tried it out before, and I learned from doing this, when I had the two lights, how far forward I could come before I lost the effect, how far back I was from the lights before I lost the effect, and roughly kind of where I needed to be, and what kind of effect it was going to give me. So, you know, you can use that. Sometimes and then if you've got, you can play with lights and smoke machine, you can kind of go all out fun. I did this one, I've used this one quite a lot for a few years, as my professional photographer photo. I need a photo that, you know, to go on the website and what have you, which sort of says, yes, I'm a professional photographer and I kind of know what I'm doing. So we've got lights, we've got smoke, we've got setup. So the portraiture is kind of, self-portrait here is kind of like a calling card. It says, I know what I'm doing. Yeah, it's a bit of a fun photograph, but it's obviously taking a little bit of skill to be able to create. It's not just a quick selfie. So as a portrait photographer, sometimes there's a bit of pressure on it, as that your self-portrait has to be able to show off some of the skills that you've got. What have we got here? Maybe it says, I would not like to meet this person on a dark night, you look dangerous. Yeah, but I think that's fun. Pull faces, pull expressions, go serious. Capture that fraction of a second. April says, do you save a copy in colour? I will have it somewhere. Whenever I do a photo, whether it's self-portrait or anything else, I take the photos in colour and then I edit a copy of it. I open it into the software and I save it under its different file name, so that any edits I do don't touch the original. So at any point in the future, I can come back and find the original RAW file or the original JPEG and edit it again. I learned that the hard way. So a lot of the early photos I didn't do that with, and I've developed as a photographer and I've developed as an editor. And there's photos I would like to go back and re-edit because I don't like the way, when I look at them now, I don't like the way they've been edited, but it's too late. They've already been written over. So yeah, I learned kind of the hard way, but always keep an original of the photo. Don't just edit straight over the top of it. Just immediately save it under a different file name so that you edit a copy of it. So yeah, good point that, April. So, okay, into the idea of self-portraiture. Other things you can do are the idea of, we've talked about the idea of mirrors, we've talked about the idea of you know, poses and light and thing. I think sometimes what was kind of fun. So the ultimate selfie that I did last week had 10 of me in the same photo, but you don't necessarily have to go as far as that. Sometimes you can create photos of more than one you, and these are really fun. They're really difficult to try and get, but they can be fun if you can use cameras and webcams, or even a second camera and mirrors and things like that. You can really create something. So one of the early ones I did like this was this one. And so what I did here is I've got the camera on a tripod pointing at me, and then I've got another camera behind it taking a photo of the camera taking a photo of me. Now obviously everything is being set on well, I took this photo, I sat in the right place, I worked out how to do the self-portrait, taken this photo, and then basically I've got this on display in the back of the camera, and then I've got the camera behind it set on a 10-second timer, so I can move back round, get into the same place again, and take the photo of the camera. It's tricky trying to line it all up. At this point, I think I had then a mirror behind the camera so I could sort of see what the camera was seeing, but otherwise there's always a fair amount of, you take the photo, you run back round, you look at it and you realise that your head was too far to the left or too far to the right. It isn't the same. There is a trickiness, the technical difficulty. It takes you much longer to take a photo of yourself because you're not seeing through the lens at the same time, unless you want to tether the camera. Now, if you have the software, Canon has the software. If you've got a Canon camera, you can do it quite easily. But there's a lot of other bits and pieces. There is software out there if you can develop it. Now this one I did is where, again, this is where I have the camera tethered to the tablet. So what I've actually got is the actual camera itself is sitting here where my mannequin currently is. Okay, so if you were where the mannequin is, looking over my shoulder, this is basically the view you would see. So the camera was sitting up here. Now I've got a line running from that camera down behind the tree, the chair, coming in to my tablet here. So this tablet is showing what the camera can see. So I'm looking at the tablet and I can see what it's seeing, which is this. And this in turn can see the tablet, which in turn can see the tablet, until would go on forever, except the fact we run out of resolution. But I'm also, this is my view. So this here is the camera. So as I'm talking to you right now, this is exactly what I see. This is what I'm looking into. And then here, the camera is pointing at my face. My face is then appearing on this screen. And it looks like I'm looking at you because I'm looking at the camera. Okay, so this essentially is my setup. But by doing this, having it over my shoulder and then having it on the tablet, and because this tablet, my finger here is clicking the button, which is, because it's set to the camera, is then firing the camera. And you can see it actually says capturing on here, because I've just pressed that. It's now capturing the image. And there's the histogram and all the other bits and pieces. So in this one, I've got me here and I've got me here, so that's 2. Then I've got 3, 4, then I've got 5. By the time we get to 6 and 7, it's just too small to make out. But in essence, I've managed to get 5 of me into the same photo without using Photoshop to paste anybody in. So a photo of me looking into a camera over my shoulder via the tablet. It was fun trying to work that one out, but once I worked it out, I felt I had a bit of a smug moment for that, I have to say. So the idea then of the technicalities, if you're the kind of person who really likes to sort of play around with, and Ben, I'm kind of half thinking of you here as well with, you know, that kind of engineering mind, that way of trying to, can you get more than one of yourself into the same photo without using Photoshop, I think is it depends. If that just feels like too much for you, don't worry about it. But it's an option for those of you who really want to go in and explore it a bit further. What else have we got? Oh, Ben says, I was amazed how quickly you took all those pictures for the ultimate selfie. The sun hadn't moved much from start to finish. It would have taken me all day. Actually, the sun had moved. It was above the horizon and then it had gone below the horizon. And the fact was I had to take the right one I had to use the horizon as another one that I had to put in. But there is a bit that, because the tripod was in exactly the same place, you click it, 10-second exposure, you've got 10 seconds to go and get round into place, and you take half a dozen. In the end, you can do it relatively quickly if you kind of know what you're doing beforehand. Okay, April says, so interesting to see your view. Rosemary says, oh, my tethering software is so frustrating. I would love to give tethering a fair shot, but right now the whole shoot time is devoted to troubleshooting the software. Oh, that is a pain. That's fair enough. April says the photo looks interesting on the wall in the middle. Hold on one sec. I need to see which one is it. This one. Oh, this one is the Doctor Who and the Androids of Money Hive Comic Festival. Have I talked about this one? I'm sure I've talked about this photo before, at the very least in terms of editing. I'll have a think about that one, April. I think I've done. I'll see if I can dig out one of the previous, find the previous podcast where I did in fact talk about that photo, and if I remember, then I'll tell you what, message me, April. We're connected on Facebook Messenger. Message me and say that photo with the Dalek in it, or that photo. Can you tell me? And I'll look it up and I'll let you know which podcast it was in, and then you can go and find out about it. Right. So. Oh, good. April says she will. Excellent. So this idea then of setting up self-portraiture. So the thing is once you can't start doing this, you can also think about creating a scene with you in it. Now, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be like the ultimate selfie where you've got 20 of yourself or whatever into it, but this is portraiture. This is a chance to kind of create a photo. Now, you can, if you've got somebody who's willing to do it, you can have somebody. I mean, we did this photo on Maggie and I's silver wedding anniversary. We were in lockdown. We couldn't go anywhere. Here's the shed where we go out for having our coffee most mornings. What we call our shed cafe. You can see here we got coffee and mugs and so again, camera set up. 10-second timer, Maggie's sitting there, I click, run round, leap into place, go back, take a look, realise one of us is blinking or the bodies are at the wrong angle, and kind of keep doing it until I kind of feel that I've got it right. And with this one though, I'm going for the full photography exercise. This isn't just a selfie with a camera on a selfie stick. I've put in an off-camera flash in the shed with an orange gel on it so that it's lighting up the inside. I've actually got a big light on a softbox just out of sight on the left here because although there's a bit of blue sky there, it was a bit dull down here because the light was coming from the wrong angle. So I've got the light falling on us here. So I've actually gone ahead and created quite a sophisticated lighting setup to create a scene. It's a selfie. It's of me and Maggie, or me with Maggie, and but it's a self-portrait. It's a couple's portrait with me in it. And it's back to this thing of take the time to really... it's your opportunity to really create a photo. You can also have fun. Another little bit of fun here is this one. So the camera's now literally sitting in the fridge. Set for a 10-second timer. And then you can, I'm opening the fridge door, looking at a pepper like, what on earth is this strange fruit here? I've never seen anything like it before, and I'm not entirely sure whether it's edible or not. You can have I've seen similar things to this done where somebody's put a camera inside a washing machine or a dryer. You could put it inside a dog kennel. Are there interesting places in the house, coming out of a cupboard, under the TV? But something actually, maybe the TV's not quite so, but you want something where you're seeing a bit of the thing that it's inside and then set up. So there's actually then becomes, you can have fun exploring this idea of creating a scene from an angle that you could never see. I mean, nobody's ever going to see what you look like looking inside the fridge, but you shove a camera in there, 10-second timer, you can do that, okay? And in fact, actually, again, the light from the fridge itself wasn't bright enough. So just immediately to the right of the camera, again, I've got an off-camera flash set to go. So as soon as it goes click, that's then lighting me up. So that's allowing me to add a bit of extra light into the picture. Right. Okay. April says, it's called a pepper. Yeah. So there's that kind of fun. The other thing you can do, so as we're talking here, is that a kind of set a scene, is the idea of dressing up. And this is coming back then to what I wanted to talk about, was the idea of a way of getting past I don't really like having a photo of me, is to be a character. Take on board a character, become a character. And then the photo isn't about how good a likeness of me is it, it's how good a likeness of the character I'm trying to portray is it. And this is a really important one. Even if you forget everything else, when it comes to self-portraiture, I think this is one to really remember, because it's a trick that I use all the time when I'm doing professional portrait photography. Because most people feel uncomfortable, for all the reasons we talked back at the beginning, trying to take a photo of somebody where everybody's deeply insecure, and they fear that insecurity is going to project out onto the camera, and so the camera is going to capture their insecurity rather than how they would like to come across. So what I nearly always say is, well, okay, become a character. Imagine you're a character. If you're trying to come across as the boss, the CEO of an important company, imagine you're the boss of an important company. Puff yourself up, project, have a bit of fun. play act it out. If you're wanting to come across as warm and friendly, imagine you're warm and friendly. Imagine holding your grandson for or your child the first time on the day they were born, or if you've got a puppy or a kitten, imagine the first time you held them. And as soon as you start thinking about that, your face softens. Then I go click. But you can play a part, become a character. Those self-portraits where I'm not smiling, I'm not, whether I'm looking at the pepper strangely or I'm glaring into the camera with strange lighting. It's taking on the role of a character is the bit that's really going to make it an interesting photo. So the self-portrait can be a character portrait using yourself. Now, it can be sometimes it's as simple as shoving on a hat and pulling a face. So if we go back to here for a moment, this one I took, I was, I'm not trying to be serious. I was just, there's a TV series called Peaky Blinders, set in the 1920s, and a lot of them have these kind of hats and everything, and I had that, and I put on a collarless shirt, and I just wanted to sort of take a photo. I was having a bit of fun. There was some kind of memes or things going on Facebook at the time, I think, and so I just thought I would have a little bit of fun and then do a kind of mean, moody Birmingham gangster in the 1920s look. Now, not completely accurate, because actually that kind of facial hair with the kind of goatee beard wasn't a common facial hair look at the time. But again, I've got natural sunlight coming in from the left, but I've got a reflector over on the right to bounce a little bit of light coming back, which is then sort of hitting the edge of my jaw and the back of my neck, giving me a little bit more definition. So I'm still using the skills of photography and lighting to try and create something. Or in this case here, I've got a top hat and some kind of tinted glasses, and then I've done an overlay in with a kind of textured overlay in Photoshop. And I think last time I showed this, somebody sort of said it kind of looked a little bit steampunk in some ways. So again, this isn't about me saying this is me. This is kind of taking on some kind of character who looks like he could be in some kind of weird film or Mad Hatter, or it's children's nightmare fairy tale or something. There's all sorts of things you can do. Sometimes you can just have a little bit of fun. Like this, I mean, I use this as an example of how just with your camera, this is, with your phone rather, grumpy before you've had your first coffee of the morning. I've got my "Who's the Daddy" mug. For those who aren't familiar with the phrase, just in case it does happen to be British culturalism, there is a phrase where you go, "Who's the daddy?" as in like, who's the best, who's the main man, who's the owner here. And this was a mug from, I think, my daughter Meg a few years ago, saying, "Who's the daddy?" And of course I'm her daddy, so it was a nice kind of little double. But just that idea of you sitting in a dressing gown, pulling a grumpy face with a cup of coffee. It doesn't have to be anything super spectacular with wild outfits. And then last year when we did this, when I did the self-portrait challenge, I had a go at playing around with myself. Some of you may remember this one, where I stuck on a hat, desaturated, playing around with a particular light form, glass of whiskey in front, looking for all the world a kind of grumpy or disillusioned person sitting at a bar having a drink, And again, I'm just slightly out of sight of this. I've got the camera tethered to the tablet. So my tablet is sitting down and just immediately out of the corner of the left. In fact, actually, I think I might have had to have just photoshopped out the bottom corner of it, so that I can see what's going on. And then I was able to lean across, click the tablet, set on a 2 or 10-second timer, put my hand back, click, it goes off. So if you can tether the camera to a tablet or laptop or something like that, it does certainly make it a lot easier. Done in the same shoot as well, playing around, stick a teddy there, like I'm showing that we've got packs of seeds there, almost like I'm in conversation saying, what are we going to be growing this summer? Just having a bit of fun. The background wasn't a brick wall, it was just a piece of black cloth, and I photoshopped in the black wall. And I think actually if you go back to episode 51, I think it is, I think I sort of take you through how I created these photos. But the point being that you can have quite a bit of fun with this idea of a character shoot with it. what's Rosemary saying? You have so many clever ideas. Thanks for the inspiration. It'd be fun to see how people run with their self-portraits. Yeah, well, a lot of the ideas, you can see what other people are doing. And if you're really stuck, go back and take a look at episode 52, where you'll see what everybody was up to last year. And I will just say, I don't want anybody putting in the same photo they did last year, just before anybody sort of gets that idea. So this is really kind of what I want to say. So this is the whole point of the self-portraiture. So, self-portrait challenge for next week. I want you to take a photo of yourself. And I want you to have fun with it. Remember, this is an opportunity to really develop your photography. And to try and get past that idea that, oh, I hate being in front of the camera. Become a character. Create a scene. Stage something. Get interesting with mirrors or cameras or webcams. There's so many different possibilities to explore that if you're really, it's a major opportunity to develop your understanding of photography. And let's face it, understanding photography. That's what these podcasts are all about. Trying to help you improve your understanding of photography. And it will really make a huge difference if you have a go at this. I know it's going to be taking you massively out of your comfort zone. That's kind of the point, okay? Give it a go. And the next week we will look through all the photos. Make sure you send the photos. Try and get them here by Friday, Saturday at the absolute latest. If it turns up on Sunday morning, I'm not really going to have time to process it. But try and get the images to me by Friday if you can. Tell me a little bit about tell me any interesting stories, any difficulties or any particular things you had to overcome in order to make it work. Or if you've got any particular interesting ideas, say, oh, I saw this great idea on this site or by this person, and I thought I would have a go at replicating it myself. Or that idea of even replicating an old photo of yourself and updating it and saying, well, what's a modern version of me of this photo that was taken 20 years ago? These are all possibilities, and I think it'll be a huge amount of fun if you give it a go. So, okay, that's really what I want to say about that. Quick reminder of that at the end of the program. Now, we do have the critique section. And I will just say at this point also, if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them, don't forget there is always buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. And that's a wonderful way. Buy me lots of coffees. I love coffee. It's a great way of supporting the podcasts. Yeah. Okay. So now the critique section. Only had one person send in for critique this week, which was Viji, which, to be honest, was probably slightly lucky on my part, given the amount of time that's gone past already, talking about self-portraiture. Next week, there will not be a critique section because we will only be looking at the self-portraits. Although, if we'll be talking about them. I won't really be doing critique, but if you do run into a particularly difficult problem and would like a little bit of feedback on a specific issue, then do let me know, and I can try and talk about it while we're doing the podcast. Or if it's a much bigger subject, it might even trigger me to do a future podcast on that as well. So difficulties you might run into, do let me know, because it can act as really good feedback for future podcasts and for anybody else who's listening as well. So the critique section of this podcast, a chance for you to send me your images and get feedback and help. Now, so what we're going to talk about then is this one sent in by Viji. So Viji sent me this photo, and she said, I tried using the motion blur technique in this forest to give a different feel to it. I wanted to try this after watching one of your podcasts. Now, yeah, some of you may remember a photo a few months ago. Did a photo shoot of a storyteller called Benita, and where I blurred and stretched the trees up into up in the top half using Photoshop. She says. So following that, I was wondering if I could have done this any better. So I asked Viji to send me the original photo. So she sent me this, and really this is great. Viji's taken one of these ideas that I had and tried to apply it. But where the tricky bit here is the fact that I think immediately what we've got is that the blur is running through the person himself, and so. In a way, what I'll do here, I think I'll open this in Photoshop and I'll run through the technique and show you how we can kind of expand on it. So, in essence, the way of doing this technique is I duplicate the layer over here, and then I go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur. Now we've got motion blur there. I dare say if you're using GIMP or if you're using can't remember what's the other. There's another one begins with an A that quite a few people use. There will be an equivalent, and you can change the direction of this. That's sideways, a diagonal one. But what this is, we're doing this one at exactly 90 degrees, because the 90 degrees then, that's not 990, 90 degrees, it goes in the same direction. Let's just undo that again because I hit enter too quickly. So blur, motion blur, and what we can do then is we can change the amount it blurs. We can change it a lot until we get to a kind of where you can't see anything except blur. Now, I think actually it's quite fun to sort of do something like that, where it really stretches out, something like that. Now we've got that, we mask the image. I'm going to just take a, and we can paint back in the original. So we have our person here, and the tree, and their wee boy who they're taking a photo of. Now that looks like it's a bit kind of solidly done. So if we then say take the opacity of the brush down to something like 20% or something like that, when we can kind of create a soft brush here and just very gently kind of smooth in the background a little bit like that. And so it's a case of sort of playing around with it until you've got a kind of a nice blend with it. However, we do have another slight problem with this one, which is when we look at this blur, let's go back a little bit here. There's a nice kind of motion blur in the middle, but as we go kind of up towards the top, it becomes very lined. And this is because the blur is bigger than the picture. So it's blurring out and it's not quite sure what it's supposed to be doing with the top. So the way around this, the way to stop getting these thin lines, if you want these kind of broader, thicker, blurrier lines rather than these kind of hard lines at the top, is to actually stretch the picture beforehand and then cut it off. So what we do is we add a bit and then take a bit off. So what I'm going to do, let's just duplicate that layer again. And now, if I go to the crop, and I'm going to do the content aware crop, let's just pull out a little bit here. Now, if I pull this up, take this up to much bigger than I'm going to need it. But I'm going to do the content aware and click enter. And what it's done is it's now decided, it's taken the trees below and it's added them on. Except for the fact that, of course, it doesn't look very realistic. It's sort of made them bigger as it's gone up. But that doesn't matter because these are going to blur out. So now what I do is I duplicate this layer. And then when I go to the filter, blur, motion blur, you can see all this, those, I can really give it quite a lot of blur like that if I want. I can really go a long way. And it's this sort of top bit here, down to roughly about there, where we've got these kind of little tiny lines, which aren't really what I'm wanting. But that doesn't matter because now I can crop those off. Having added them on, I can now remove them. And now, when we go to the, I mask it, and I start painting back in, and doing that, I can just keep kind of coming in, and we can see that we get this kind of effect here. Maybe I've gone a little bit too far, let's just sort of blur that down a little bit. If we wanted, we could have stretched that up even higher, made more of a feature of it. But as you can see, that really that's the way to do it. But sorry, X, that's what I'm trying to do, just make them a little bit clearer on the bottom. So you want to be careful that the people themselves aren't getting blurred because that just looks a little bit odd. But if you want to have that sense of the trees sort of disappearing up, then you can do that. Maybe what you might want to do is even make those trees darker or make this even taller. Very kind of, let's do that. Take it up even taller. Still got the content aware on it, but maybe I want to darken that bit down again. So let's take curves. Yeah, curves, there we go. And I want to sort of darken the top part but not all of it. So again, with the curves, I'll just put that up to 100% for a moment. So I only really want the top half kind of. And now I'll do select all that, copy, paste, filter. I'll just do the same blur that we did last time. And then just crop down that top part there, something like that. And now when we do the mask, and again, take that back down to sort of 20 or maybe less. Then because it's darker, the sort of, I think it actually works sort of slightly better with that notion of disappearing up into the darkness of the trees. There isn't the light kind of grabbing your attention as much, and so that kind of, I think, accentuates and exaggerates that sense. So I hope that gives you an idea there, VG, of how to play around with that particular effect. Right, so what have we got? Yeah, okay, so VG says, yes, it was a problem with the people themselves getting blurred, and you need to make the trees a bit taller. Cool, right, okay, so that pretty much brings us to the end of what I was going to talk about. So just a wee reminder then that next week is the Self-Portrait Challenge, and I really, really want to see you give it a go. Give it a go. If at the worst comes to the worst, you gave it a go and it doesn't work, at least you gave it a go. You will still learn a huge amount. Remember, I'm always saying you don't necessarily learn from what works, you learn from what doesn't work. And there's going to be an awful lot of doesn't work on the way to getting to what works. Give it a go. Submit your image. Next week, we'll see what everybody's got and inspire each other. There's so many different ways you can go with this. You can, like I say, you can play with mirrors, you can play with cameras, you can play with webcams, you can try and recreate old photos of yourself, you can play characters, you can stick on outfits, you can create scenarios, and then if you really want to do it, you can go like the ultimate selfie and start copying and pasting yourself into different areas. There's an awful lot of potential and a chance to really explore photography, light, form, composition without having to worry about pleasing anybody else or anybody else's time scale. So I really hope you will give this a go, and I'm dying to see what you will come up with. So that's us. Get the images in for next week, ideally by next Friday. So thank you to everybody who's sent something in. What have we got here? Oh, I know what I forgot. Actually, a very last quick thing. I forgot to say I put in a question of the week today, early this week, just to kind of see how people are about the idea of having their own photo taken. And I put up half a dozen different options, and I will just quickly run through them. So what was interesting was a third of the people, I put a tick the box that said, I've learned to, when I said, how do you feel about having your photo taken? One of the options was, I've learned to tolerate it, but prefer not to. And about 35% of people came up with that option. 32%, so running a close second to that, was I'm usually up for it if you give me a few minutes to prepare myself. And then 12% of people said I don't really mind one way or the other. And then another 9% said I really don't like it. It has to be on an extremely special occasion, and even then I'll probably hide behind somebody else. 6% said, I love it, I'm a natural poser for the camera. And 3%, which is actually one person, because it was just about 32 people took part, said, no way, if you point that camera at me, then not only will I take it off you and break it into a million pieces, no one will ever find your body. And that was Jackie. So don't ever try and take a photo of Jackie when she's not ready for it. But Jackie, I would love it if you would find a way of taking part in the Self-Portrait Challenge. Become a character, if that's the only way that you can have a character. You know, find a hat and an outfit and an interesting scenario. I think it would be amazing. So that then is really the last bit of what I wanted to say. So thank you once again to everybody who contributed to the commenting and all the rest of it. Thank you to Viji for sending in the image, and I look forward to seeing you all next week, episode 117 on the 31st of July. Take care. Bye-bye.